Anthem is coming very, very soon, and there's plenty to parse about it. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, Anthem 10 things you need to know. Number 10 is that it has a non-traditional story. A traditional story follows a certain structure. You have your exposition, your rising action, your climax, and your conclusion. You'll probably see elements of all of these things at some point, but the point is actually to have a story that doesn't end. In fact, the story has to do with the idea of an unfinished world, a world that can continually change forever. There is something called a shaper in the world of Anthem, who used massive machines to form the world. This is actually where the name of the game comes from. The force was called the Anthem of Creation. And they didn't quite finish, they just left sort of halfway through. And this world, it's not done. And the technology that they left behind, it's not dead. Like it works from time to time, it changes the world. The executive producer, Mark Dara, said this is a world that is stuck in the middle of its genesis. The tools are just laying out on the workbench, turning themselves on and off and causing the world to shift and change. He went on to say there's no colony ships. There's ruins out in the wilderness that were obviously built by people, in addition to the ancient bits of shaper technology lying around, but humans have been here long enough that there are ruins built by humans. Also, they assert that humans originated here, but it's not Earth. So you have to keep in mind this is a totally alternate universe. Now, it's my opinion that these pieces of the story are probably the most interesting. Yes, you're a freelancer and you go out and explore and find technology and shape things and change things and attack stuff and yada yada. That's obvious. But it's these pieces of lore, in my opinion, that will probably shape the game more than anything else, if you'll excuse the pun. Shapers, all that I find most interesting, and I think will probably direct where we go eventually in this game, assuming it's good. Number 9, apparently if you're buying the game on PS4 Pro, it is smoother. According to Digital Foundry, those folks who always spend a lot of time checking frame rate and consistency and all that, and we often see comparison videos from those folks. They do a good job, and what they've found is that on the PS4 Pro, the game runs more smoothly. However, it's probably because it's running in 1800p instead of 4K like it does on the Xbox One X, which is an interesting sacrifice to make, honestly. There's no way they don't know that on the Xbox One X, it doesn't run as smoothly, and there's likely at least a few people who won't notice the difference between 1800p and 4K. But what's most interesting to me is that on the PS4 Pro, you have the option of playing Anthem in 1080p, and you get performance that peaks around 50 frames per second. There's nothing like that on the Xbox One X, and for me, frames per second matters a lot more than resolution above 1080p, but keep in mind these are not final measurements. This isn't stuff for the full-blown final version of the game, or at least shipping version of the game. I know the game is going to constantly change over the next few years, that's the whole point. Still, this is very interesting stuff to think of. I have to imagine myself playing in 1080p just for the extra FPS, but I don't know. There's some people who don't prefer things that way. And then there's just people who play it on the PC. Like, they obviously get better FPS and resolution. Number 8 is customization. There are a large number of customization options for your character in Anthem, giving you the ability to change pretty much every element. There is a lot in regards to the helmet, chest, arms, legs, paint schemes, vinyls, stickers, and various animations that you can add to your character. And I think a lot of people expected this kind of stuff. There has been talk about it, but they've even gone as far to change the shaders in a manner that is intended, I think, to be like, hey, Destiny, look, we went further. There's primary, secondary, tertiary paint for soft and hard materials for various armor. You're supposed to be able to tweak the armor not just in color but in texture, and it's RGB slider rather than selecting various colors. It's really intended to be very customizable. And if you've watched them do it, they did a stream, it looks like you'll have a lot to change, meaning anybody who plays these games for character creation is gonna spend years on just that. However, you cannot customize the actual character themselves. You just pick from a number of various heads, which I know some people aren't gonna like that, but I also kind of think the customization of the javelins matters more, because that's basically what you're going to see for the majority of the time you're playing. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what people think. Number 7 is progression. The first thing that needs to be noted here is that progression is separate for the pilot and the javelin. You'll have specific customizations you can make to your pilot, which will ultimately regard more experience-oriented things, like you'll be able to fly for longer periods of time without overheating in a javelin, something that you could assume an actual pilot might get better at, knowing exactly what taxes the machine and what doesn't. And you'll also gain a lot of equipment through the loot collection process, which will allow you to progress your javelin. There's also elements of customization. You could change things like cooldown, or give a different type of attack, or strengthen the type of attack, which, if done in a manner that actually aids your playstyle, is ultimately going to bring you into a more realized and developed character. Number 6, speaking of loot, here's how that works. Now, there are a lot of other RPGs that have a few different levels of rarity for loot. With all the weapon specific stuff is the same, more or less. The stats of the weapon work on the same kind of random roll that Destiny players might understand pretty well at this point. They have components that essentially add statistics or abilities to your javelin. However, they don't cosmetically affect the javelin, because as we've talked about, the cosmetics are entirely separate from every actual gameplay element, and I have a feeling that has to do with the business model. They don't want people to associate looking cool with having loot, because they probably don't want people to feel like it is a pay-to-win experience, and I think that's probably a good choice. Number 5, the character classes are also very different. You can customize the javelins, but they also start from 4 specific places: Ranger, Colossus, Storm, and Interceptor. Ranger specifically being the kind of well-rounded, does-it-all, but not as good as any specialized class that most games have. But if you want to move beyond that type of thing, you would want to pick one of the other 3, including the Colossus, which is, as you might expect from its name, the more beefy boy. It's got more heavy armor, it's more oriented on outliving your opponent, having the ability to take on a lot more fire, and obviously have some pretty intense melee and long range stuff. The Storm Javelin is more along the lines of kind of your mage class, but a robot. The attacks it has are kind of magic-like. They are technologically oriented, I would assume. Whereas the Interceptor Javelin is much more oriented around movement, mobility, and more or less is there for you to handle pretty much everything except for heavy guns that you might use with the Colossus, for instance. Obviously, there's a various amount of advantages and disadvantages that come with both, or you can kind of take the jack of all trades, master of none approach with the Ranger. Number 4, this game gets compared to Destiny a lot. Jonathan Warner, the game's director, said it doesn't really upset him that much that people compare it to Destiny. He thinks that the whole game comparison starts to fall apart pretty rapidly, actually. He talks about verticality, which, I mean, to be fair, even from like a cursory look at footage of the 2 games, there is a massive difference between them regarding verticality. I mean, it's just painfully obvious when you look at them. However, there are elements of it that I think do seem quite reminiscent of Destiny, but we'll see. Jonathan Warner said that the game is oriented very towards an our world, my story approach, and the intent is to allow you to engage with the story at a pace you find comfortable, which, in my opinion, isn't really addressing the comparison between Destiny and Anthem, but I don't know, I think the proof is more in the pudding, and I think that we'll see what people really think about that. Maybe in a couple of weeks after release, I think there'll probably be consensus that emerges. And at number 3, let's break down the post-launch roadmap, because of course there's going to be plenty of stuff to do, see, play after launch. I mean, that's the point of an ongoing game like this. On the 22nd, the ongoing narrative begins, and in March, Echoes of Reality, which is referred to as Act 1, is going to hit with new events, quality of life updates, new rewards. The progression system will be expanded, which is pretty interesting considering the promise of extended growth on all of those types of things. There's going to be a new stronghold, guilds and leaderboards will launch, there will be a cataclysm, there will be new missions, and it will take place over 3 updates that all happen starting in March, and they are named Evolving World, Stronger Together, and the Cataclysm. We don't have dates for Act 2 and Act 3, but we do have one interesting thing. The acts are a double-digit number. It's actually Act 01, 02, and 03, meaning we can probably assume there's going to be at least 10 acts, which that sounds good. Number 2, and I think this is really important to note, they have adopted a microtransaction model that is a little less aggressive, which is good. More specifically, microtransactions will only be on cosmetics, more akin to the Overwatch model. And again, you'll be able to earn every single thing. There are no items that are microtransaction only, at least as of now. We have no real reason to assume they will insert that, but it is owned by EA, keep that in mind. There are a few items you will not be able to earn, but they are not microtransaction oriented. They are purely related to pre-orders and promo bonuses. And he didn't say anything about the permanence of those items either. Maybe eventually they will be released into the ecosystem, we don't know. Their intent is very oriented towards balance of the economy of Anthem, and that's a good thing. Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree that a game that costs $60 should have microtransactions. That's something that is at least being semi-addressed here in making it so that they're very unnecessary to engage in. Let's hope the balance of the actual game post-launch is reasonable, and yeah, it's good that it really can't be pay to win. You cannot buy weapons, you can't buy crafting materials, it's just cosmetic stuff. And in such a big release from such a big company that's been talked about for quite a few years now, that's good. I mean, that's some element of progress. I do want to acknowledge it is a games as a service game, so it's probably a little more expected they would have some microtransactions, and being cosmetic only is better, not necessarily perfect, because again, you are spending $60 on a AAA game here. And in truth, I could probably find a way to complain about this still, but it's a far cry from where we were with Star Wars Battlefront 2 literally making us grind for a very long time for any of the things that you would very easily pay for, which is not good. So this is better. At least, it's better. And finally, number 1, some launch information. Anthem is coming out February 22nd, so not long. You can start a week earlier on February 15th, which, I mean, come on, was it really that necessary? Just release it on the 15th. In order to get it on the 15th, you have to do it through EA Access on Xbox or Origin Access on PC. Frankly, I'm not going to read the spreadsheet any further than that. There are a bunch of pre-order exclusives. I'll detail a couple. Pre-ordering a GameStop, for instance, will get you an Edge of Resolve vinyl. If you pre-order the standard, you'll get a legendary weapon and the Legion of Dawn Ranger armor. If you pre-order the Legion of Dawn edition, you'll get armor packs for all the javelins, a Ranger javelin, gear attachment, a legendary weapon, and the digital soundtrack. Anthem's real test is ultimately going to be if all this stuff comes together, merges into one single cohesive thing that's enjoyable, memorable, and gives you enough reason to keep playing. I think there's a reasonable expectation that it may actually do this, but I do also feel that there's enough disparate elements that there is some room for skepticism, even at this point. I want to say I err towards the former, and I kind of believe it is going to be good. They seem to understand what they're talking about. There was some messiness over the beta pre-launch gameplay, but I don't think that it was enough to say, well, Destiny's probably gonna be bad. Honestly, I think Anthem is probably gonna be good. How good? We'll see, but I think that it's gonna be good, and I'm looking forward to playing it quite a bit. What do you think? Leave us a comment, what you're thinking about. We want to know what seems most interesting to you, what you're maybe a little concerned about. If anything, hopefully not. Honestly, let's give this a fresh start. Let's say, this could be something very good in video games, and we all want it to be that. So, looking forward to talking to you there. If you like this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.